Now, if you're not already aware, it's a very exciting time here at the museum as 2024 marks the museum's 30th anniversary. And so in honor of that, we do have a wonderful membership sale, 30 for $30 and up. So should you be interested, feel free to visit the museum shop, or you can visit our website at kemperart.org for more details. Now, for today's program, we are thrilled to welcome former Kemper Museum Director of Curatorial Affairs for 10 years, Erin Dziedzic. Erin is a curator, lecturer, and writer now based in New York. Her work focuses on developing a wide range of exhibitions, commissions, and scholarship that includes a deep commitment to women artists globally and amplifying historically excluded artists. Throughout her career, Erin has collaborated with noted contemporary artists including Polly Applebaum, Angela Dufresne, Virginia Jaramillo, and Rashid Johnson, just to name a few. She has been a guest speaker at several institutions, including 21C Museum, the American Association of Museum Curators, and Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago. And her most recent book publications include Virginia Jaramillo, Principle of Equivalence, released last year in conjunction with the traveling exhibition of the same name, which is available at the Kemper Museum shop. Also, her monograph on artist Denzel Forrester launches October 8th and is currently available for pre-order at the museum shop. Joining her is artist Lucía Vidales, and Lucía is a painter living in Monterrey, Mexico, where she is an art professor at the University de Monterrey. She has been commended on numerous occasions by Mexico's Secretary of Culture, and her most recent exhibitions include Sudor Frio at Proxico Gallery in New York and Too Cool the Blue at Tokyo's Takaishi Gallery. Vidales' layered paintings engage themes of materiality, the body, and the consequences of historical and colonial imaginaries. The beings that populate her paintings suggest the potential for confrontation, but seldom follow through. Instead, they play with humor or anxiety or seek consolation from ancient wounds. For Lucía's Kansas City venture, the 2024 Atrium Project expanded to fill Kemper Museum's entire central core, inviting Lucía to set the table for her immersive, mural-sized narratives and modern interpretations seen depicted on ombre and View from Mount Calvary, collectively reflecting themes of spirituality, community, and Vidales' desire to broaden audiences to the nuances of iconic imagery and reconsider its evolution in meaning in contemporary context. And so now, everyone, please help me welcome Erin Dziedzic and Lucía Vidales. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I just want to send a quick thank you to all the Kemper Museum staff, and especially Jessica May for inviting us to do this project. It's a really wonderful opportunity, and of course I want to thank Lucía for all of her hard work over the past, several months in order to make this project a possibility for us to enjoy for the next year. With some really fantastic programming by the Kemper Museum's education program. So I would definitely stay tuned because there's a lot of exciting things coming up. Today we'll talk a little bit about Lucía's beginnings as an artist and then kind of lead up into the project that you'll see here out in the atrium space. It was a wonderful opportunity to be introduced to her work through Proxico, which is her gallery in New York City. I was attending an art fair and I turned a corner and was just like, what is happening? The painting just really, really drew me in, and that's how the conversation started, and that's how many conversations start with artists, is just kind of seeing something that really impacts you in a lot of ways, aesthetically, and then also kind of as you dig a little bit deeper, as we will today, you learn a lot more about where the artist's perspective is coming from and how that really kind of unfolds, and we learn a lot more about some of the things that she's been thinking about for quite some time. Probably one of the images that I had seen early on looked like this. Really fantastic use of color, and of course, all of these tremendous layers of aqueous colors and opaque colors, but there's a transformation kind of quality here where we're morphing between abstraction and figuration, and then we're also kind of getting into her use of charcoal, which she uses to kind of amplify certain areas within those particular works. One of the questions I did want to start with was, what made you interested in becoming a painter? What are some of those? Was it school? Was it kind of like the same experience I had with your work where you saw something and you were like, ooh? Can you tell us a little bit about how your beginnings as a painter started?
Yeah, thank you, Erin, for this introduction, and Christian, and all the museum and everyone for being here. I think in the very beginning, it was pretty much as a child, just liking to draw, and then painting kind of came over as, just in school, like many people. So then the game kind of started to get serious, and I was like really into it. And also there might be some specific paintings that I remember from primary school, like Goitia's painting of these two women that are weeping, of someone that died. And this painting was made in the context after the revolution, so it was hard time for, like the life of many people in Mexico. And also this painting it has this sort of expressionistic feel, and so I think it was all together. And then at some point decided to study art, and I went to the Esmeralda, which is a university in Mexico that it's a public university focused in arts, and so many great painters from the history of the country have been there or teach there. So but when I went there, painting was not like the main thing. And also I had my own questions about painting, because it has all this history that it's so heavy, and it has all this like solemnity to it. So I was trying to find how could I relate to that love of painting, and at the same time to have a sort of distance with aspects of it I wasn't sure of. But to make the story not that long, that made me go, I think, deeper and deeper into the self-story of painting, and using more traditional materials, and thinking a lot about the canvas and frame and all that tradition and thoughts that are about sight and Western culture. And so, I kind of being, my practice is based, on painting, but has a lot of insight into material processes and into imagination, which is for me something that can link all these interests, like story and fiction and subjectivity, and things that we can.
I think that's a really important point that you bring up, is that you're having these investigations and conversations with history, but you had mentioned in our conversations this week that wasn't always something that you were encouraged to do in the classroom. A lot of times, there was a strong push by your professors to really consider modernism and to not look back, right? So it's kind of an interesting, it's interesting that you decided to take what you needed from them in terms of advice, and then forged your own path in looking at some historical works as a painter and discovering why that medium was kind of connecting with what you were deciding to paint as subjects and as a painter as well. No, it's nice that you bring that up because also in our conversation this week, Lucia had mentioned that when she was suggesting and encouraging us as people who may be traveling to Mexico City to go to this building that nobody ever goes to specifically see a large amount of murals that she experienced as a child growing up and seeing these spaces. And just her talking about that, you could see where some of those early influences of your work had come from, which is it's kind of exciting to see that playing back in what you're doing today, and remember that as a point of influence, even if it wasn't something directly correlated. And I think that aspect of your work comes up a lot. Like, you're dealing with subjects that are familiar to us, but you're definitely using your own language to express some of these ideas that you have.
Yeah, these murals Erin is mentioning are in the Secretaría de Educación Pública, which are Diego Rivera's murals. And yeah, it's very interesting for me because those are amazing. Those are frescoes and are around 90, something like that. It's amazing the quantity of murals. There are also Siqueiros paintings there, but also women were really left aside in that process. So you have Maria Izquierdo was supposed to make murals there, and in the end she didn't get the commission. So there is this thing love of the paintings, but also have this very problematic story of it. Yeah, I think it's very nice to see this painting because, yeah, the reference to this figure is the painting I was telling you before of Goitia with the woman. And for me, I wanted to imagine a place within painting, and color for me is something, it's like a mystery. It might sound cliche, but it is in the way that I think it can transform spaces and everything. So yeah, I wanted to make a possibility for the figures, or how I saw the figures on Goitia's painting, to have a different yay.
He's fine.
Yeah, I think because they also talk about death, or they approach death and pain, which is for me very important. And I really love the art like Goya's that can do that, but also can kind of heal that situation in a way, or find a different approach to it, or give it a different reality to it. So yeah, for me, color, or the relationship with cartoon and humor, it's a possibility of doing that, to relate in different terms to that past that, yeah, it's problematic or painful.
It draws on those in-between spaces too, right? The in-between in cycles of life and death. You have imagery in here that's related to the figure, but also really kind of seamlessly morphs into abstraction. So you're existing between those two spaces. You're existing in between a lot of things. And I think that's a strength in the imagery, because it doesn't allow us to see everything right away. We see parts and pieces that maybe are relevant to us or have some kind of resonance with us, but then it's taken on another path. What's your exploration in that kind of existing within that space? You play a lot in there.
what painting does is, to me, is to create a different kind of time and possibility that can include simultaneity and also contradiction within, or uncertainty within one space, but that space is not only subjective, it's also material. Orozco's perspective is a modern one, and in these murals he has male figures, and his idea of fire and industry, it's between being pessimistic about it and very critical as well, but also he is, I think, imagining the possibilities of fire in a specific as transformative within industry and in war. So I was thinking about some other perspective that could be thought as more feminine, as we can find in paganism or in agricultural conceptions of the world, where fire is transformative and it's related to fertility and to, it's part of a material process of life and death and transformation of, like dust and charcoal drawing. So for me, it was all that was connected, and that was the idea, to approach those subjects from another perspective.
So now we get to the beginning of this project. in the atrium space. It was a fantastic opportunity. If many of you seen the atrium space prior, it was one wall when you walk in, and now Lucía was suddenly given the opportunity to have the entire space. And one thing I really want to say is thank you and amazing and congratulations, because at no point was she like, yeah, I don't think so. This is, you suddenly given me massive square footage. Her immediate response was like, yes, thank you, I'm so honored, let's figure out how to do this. And so that's always refreshing, because then you can go right into planning mode. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to have her debut this new commissioned work, which you see on one of the walls with this gorgeous new 4-panel painting and drawing, but we wanted to kind of give a sense of the lead up to where she was headed. And it started with this piece in 2020. I looked at this and I thought, wow, this wall feels very mural scale. I think Lucia's really been looking at and interested in the mural style throughout her entire career, even if that scale didn't get that big. But this particular piece got me thinking about that. And it's in multi-panels, and it really kind of like deals with you taking familiar themes and issues and really drawing them out in different ways. And what's interesting is that the last project had some ladders in it, and so does this one. And we were talking the other day about how suddenly we feel like that wall is some portal to somewhere amazing, because there's like all these ladders and information that are going up. And so that has come out of our conversations about this piece. But we're looking at this as traditionally a spiritual site, and one that can be often read as specific to Christianity. And I'm wondering, how do you navigate a subject like that and start to bring out elements of like delving into a mashup of different religious backgrounds and spiritualities and thought philosophies, and then also taking that power dynamic of this figurehead and kind of spreading that out a little bit more and giving resonance to a lot more conversations that are happening in terms of being a little bit more dynamic in the way we think about kind of power within a painting.
Yeah, it's a long story, I think, because it was something similar as the commission for the Museo Cabañas. The place this piece was going to show, it's part of a former Siqueiros studio. So, yeah, I also wanted to relate to Siqueiros. And he has this group of paintings that he made while he was a political prisoner in Mexico City. And those paintings are depictions of Christ. So I was really wondering how Siqueiros, having all his ideas about public art, and he was a communist, and he was involved in so many social issues, and how was he paying attention to these subjects and what he was interested in. So, yeah, I found that he was relating his own the image or the idea of the artist in relation to Jesus as someone that wants to change things. And he was also having a very modern idea of artist as a kind of revolutionary. And I was thinking how that I didn't find it as possible to be taught in that way today. It was really different for me, the way I understood social processes, and also the possibility of figure within a painting, which for me, figures are not something given that you just put in a painting, but there is something that has to occur to them. So yeah, and for this painting, I was thinking a lot about rising and sinking. So that was for me the possibility for figure to exist within that realm. And yeah, like thinking about the future and how it's very hard to think today that one person can save the world. So it was a very different relationship with the figure, and yeah, also some aspects of pagan traditions and depictions of the tree as a sacred symbol that connects the upper parts with the bottom parts, both of a painting and of different ways of understanding existence. Yeah, so there's also an idea of relating to BC Regal painting, as Dziedzic was finding it as a predecessor of muralism and public art, because in churches was a lot of the art that could be shared by a community in colonial countries, as in Mexico. So yeah, the panels are in wood, and they can be mobile as how do you call these? Altar, like an altar piece works, and it can change and it's fragmented. And I found that kind of space was maybe more related to our own contemporary space than maybe, yeah, the other.
Well, taking the thoughts and ideas of someone who you resonated with, who was grappling with imagery that wasn't necessarily part of their political or spiritual belief, and taking that kind of method of investigation and applying it to what you know and how you can express it in this kind of way, but still like kind of pay homage to that history of panels, of painting, of looking at these themes, but bringing them into a contemporary context. Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Which I think is what you've done here with one of the oldest themes we know, and subjects of the Last Supper. This is some of the earlier sketches that Lucía and I were sharing between each other in preparation for this. She was very ambitious in wanting to not only have a centerpiece of an oil and acrylic painting, but to really frame this particular piece in charcoal, which is such an old and amazing material used throughout art and art history, but to change that in a way where it spills out from the painting and tells a story that exists beyond the center core of the actual image. And so these are some of the preparatory drawings for this. One of these is out in the atrium space, and I was joking the other day and saying, like, I know you think this is a preparatory drawing, but this looks like a very finished, beautiful painting. and so we decided to show a couple of those in the exhibition, so you can just see a little bit about how her process was to kind of make these really almost complete drawings, and how that changed into or developed into the installation piece. But one of the questions I had for you in the early planning of this is, why the Last Supper? I think it's a theme that is so rich and investigative, but from your perspective, I'd love to know why it's a theme that you'd been thinking about for quite some time.
I think it's because of the culture I have been raised in. Yeah, like it's very common in, I don't know, you might tell me what you think, but in, like houses in Mexico to have a depiction of the Last Supper in the dining room. And yeah, it's just something I have seen something many
you grew
times.
Up with, and that resonates with you.
Yeah, and you have this very famous Dziedzic painting. So yeah, as a painter, it was always in my mind, like, how would I resolve a space like that. How could I, if I could relate at all with that painting, which in a way I can because it's there in my everyday life. So yeah, it came from that. And for me, once I start like knowing more about painting, I thought it was very interesting to have a space, a pictorial space that had this static structure, which is the table, and sometimes can be symmetric, or it has different ways of being constructed. And also you have all the figures, which are the ones that make the motion of the painting. So that problem was, for me, very interesting, and how in Renaissance that was all like a linear perspective that goes to one point, and that it's related to the way in that time human was considered the center of the universe and all that. So yeah, I was like, so I need to construct a space that can be multiple and has, what Cubism gave us so many thoughts about that. Like you could see the over part of a cup and the front, and all these simultaneity, and like uncertainty of the space, or uncertainty and contradiction in the figures. So I think it was a starting point, and then there are also other depictions of tables, and of course it has a very important social meaning for all of us, and especially also in the culture I was raised in. I really enjoy being at the table, also enjoy cooking and being there for hours. And I think it's very interesting how that place, that it's not the one considered the most productive space-time, it's so important for social life and for constructing bonds between people and meaning, and also gossip. And it's this moment when you're with your friends and you really enjoy. But also it's full of all these troubles of society, like class difference, and who is sitting, who is not there, who cannot make it that day because it has to do something else, who made possible for us to have these flowers or food or all that. So it's kind of
it becomes a more dynamic and larger conversation. Mm-hmm. And looking at the evolutions of it throughout history, it's like the politics had been embedded in this subject since the very beginning. The kind of side conversations, the people who were seated in specific areas had different points of power within the image, and that has changed over time. And I think you've also informed this subject in your own way, which takes from your personal history, adds a little bit of like universal history of the subject at large in itself, but then have also have given us the opportunity to actually get in there ourselves. Like we don't feel like there's like this barrier between what's going on in the space and how we might engage with it. Like it feels very, even though it's huge out there and it's mural size, there's an intimacy to it, and there's also an expansiveness to it, I think, which is not an easy thing to do, both with the subject and with the scale that you were working in too. So I think that's been amazing. And Lucía was generous enough to share some of the influences that she has been looking at over the course of her career leading up to this point in terms of this subject of the Last Supper. So what from those are you sort of thinking about when you're making your work?
Yeah, also as a teacher, for me, has been very important to acknowledge women painters when I give history class. So I have seen recently a lot of painting done in the 19th century by women in Mexico, which are not quite known, like Eulalie Lucio. And she, for example, makes these very original paintings that are, Olga Costa as well. Like they're so beautiful. The painting is amazing. Like, you have color, you have sensuality, you have popular culture, and I also like how, well, not like, but I think it's interesting to see how the genre, like still life or everyday life paintings, have been, because of women weren't allowed to study in the 19th century. Well, it was a process, but
certain subjects.
Yeah, it was hard for them to get into the academy or to have the same places for showing and learning how to paint. So still life was permitted to them, but not figure painting because of morals. So yeah, the genres that are considered the most important, like historical, and it was harder for women to get into that. So yeah, I wanted to have a painting that could relate in a way to that tradition of the historical painting, but also to the still life, to Olga Costa, to all these great work that I also find they have such a place for sensuality and for the body, and
also how women figured out ways to symbolically add in something that resonated with them and their experiences, even though they were sort of really only exploring specific genres that people felt were specific to them. I put this in there because I saw this recently, and so I feel like it's like such a wonderful conversation between contemporary artists. I know we were looking at some interesting kind of correlations between artists from the early part of the 20th century, but I also feel like you're very much in conversation with artists today. I mean, we talk about the past a lot when we talk about when we're having conversations about your work, so we can get an understanding of the history of it. But I also think that you're very much, part of a generation of painters who are really kind of getting into this space. And what's interesting too is that we were talking with Kevin Moore yesterday about the Infinite Regress exhibition that's here, and there's really a lot of similarities that are coming out between what Lucía is doing and what artists in the Infinite Regress exhibition are doing, and the theme at large, which is, really deeply looking at the past in such a contemporary context and finding your own voice within that aspect, having conversations with artists that you can't have conversations with in person, but you can still pay homage, be critical of them, do all these, have these kind of interesting inroads that I think is really about, what painting is saying today, what artists have to say today about the world through painting. And I think that you've done a lot in the way of really giving us a lot of different elements to consider in terms of who's at the table, who's not at the table, who is able to make it possible for us to even be at the table, which is, I think, a very important aspect of your work and something that's been added in quite a bit. I think that's my last slide and probably my last question, and I know we want to open it up to a few questions before we close today, but I wanted to thank you so much because this is a huge endeavor. It's a fantastic celebration for a 30th anniversary, and the amount of work that's gone into this and the thought and just the skillfulness of your painting has been truly inspirational, and I'm happy to see it here for the next year. And so congratulations. Welcome to Kansas City again. And thank you so much for your project.
A mic that I'll be passing around. I know it's a small room, but if you could please ask your questions into the microphone. We are recording this, and so that will help us with the recording. So if you want to raise your hand, and I can bring the mic around if anyone has a question.
I want to go back to the painting that was a series of panels, because in the space above, I was trying to picture what was up there that you didn't add. It'd be fascinating for you to go back someday and fill in that other space. Or rather, you'd rather me do it in my mind and see what it was like. And one more quick thing. As an artist, as you go down the street, your home, and you see a scene, you see people, you see trees, does it ever inspire you to just paint that, or do you use your talents more to do this reflective work from other artists?
Yeah, I think you already filled the space, which, yeah, I love that. Yeah, well, in my own process, feet have had some important place. So, yeah, I think this was maybe the end part of that process. I was very interested in feet because they could have this verticality, horizontality, and when you change that figure, it changes the whole meaning as being active, alive, or dead, or sleepy, or just repose. So, yeah, there is some symbolism I was taking from the tarot, like this image that is really suggestive, that it's dancing, and it's related to cycles of like starting and finishing cycles, which is the card of the world. But also, yeah, like in the Calvary, there were this, well, the story says that there were people that were hanged. So for me, that had a political, yeah, like reading to it. But I didn't want it to be only painful, so I thought that the figure could, you know, like be kind of free, or, but also have a place. Yeah. And the other question, I don't know if I really understood it.
That you could draw just going down the street, your home, your family, trees. Are you inspired to just do, or do you just limit your work to looking at other paintings and going from there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's all of that. Yeah, but I really want to all my experiences to go through painting while I'm painting. So, of course, there's this maybe not conscious process of my life having a place in it, but also I am very deliberate trying to relate to those traditions and problems, because they are just so interesting to me.
Like they somehow make it in there unconsciously or subconsciously. Some, you know, things that you've seen throughout your life end up in paintings perhaps at some point.
Yeah, the last slide, it made sense that, yeah, Nicole Eisenman is there, and the tradition of French painting, which I love, color, like especially. Yeah, like color is very important for me in this piece as well, and how color is related to material, how it's very different. The gray part that kind of relates to fresco, and also to drawing, and how drawing goes faster, and it's more related to thought and structure. But you also have this painting with a different, I find it a bit like crystalline, or it has these layers of color that it seems that, well, to me it seems that light comes from it instead of absorbing it as the gray part. So yeah, I'm really interested in that as well.